Hi there. This is part two of a look at what's in my retirement portfolio. In part one, we looked at the split between the various kinds of investment vehicles, registered, non-registered, and so on. Here we take a look at asset classes, what's in my retirement portfolio as divided by asset class. Um, and here, we see the real-time view using the asset asset spreadsheet that I've posted and talked about earlier. And you can see here it's divided into five different classes. In the blue, we have cash, and cash for me is cash sitting around in your investment or retirement accounts. Sometimes you have some spare change kicking around. I try not to have too much of that. The cash here is all for the most part intentional cash. And what I mean by that is the the decumulation strategy I'm using, which is called variable percentage withdrawal, has a built-in model for a cash cushion. The cash cushion is there to serve as sort of a shock absorber so that if the market moves really severely in a given month, my monthly salary is not as severely impacted. So the cash position allows me to weather some brief downturns or upturns, right? It works both ways. So VPW asks that you keep 6 months of cash available. I have more than that. In preparation for retirement, I moved to a 5% cash position just because, I felt it was better to have a little bit wiggle room in the event of a total market meltdown like we're experiencing this month. After that, you have bonds. Bonds are from all over the place, Canadian, US, international. These are debt instruments. I do not own individual bonds. Some people are fans of that. I am not. I just buy ETFs that hold bonds because they can hold thousands of bonds, and if you buy them one at a time, that's always a lot more work. And I am by definition kind of lazy. Next bit, Canadian equity sits at around 20%. Canadian equity, that's primarily the TSX 60, so the 60 largest stocks in the Canadian market, dominated by financial services, the big banks. You know them all, BMO, CIBC, RBC, and so on. So a lot of that is tied up in the banks. Um, it's not a huge percentage. You may be a little bit surprised by that. The Canadian market is not a big market in terms of the overall global market. I do have, kind of a home field bias here, but 20% to me is sufficient to give me the exposure I want. You got 35% U.S. equity here. Um, the U.S. is the largest market globally, so a lot of funds have a very big chunk of their investments in the U.S. market. So a lot of this is primarily the S&P 500, the 500 largest companies in the U.S. But there's also smaller companies in here as well, and that's kind of the choice of the all-in-ones I hold. I don't really pay too much attention to it, but the U.S. market is an important market, and we have about 35% there. And then the last chunk is international equity. So this is everything but Canada and the U.S. And in here, you've got the rest of the G7, plus a whole bunch of other markets, right? Emerging markets, China, South America, Taiwan, all of these kinds of places where you have high growth India. So, again, there's a mix here between, established economies, G7 type, as well as emerging. And again, I don't pay too much attention to the splits here. I let my all-in-one ETFs take care of that. Maybe, this whole idea is kind of new to you. And the place I got this idea was when I used to pay for an advisor, the annual 1% or 1.5%, what they always did was they would send me a very pretty printed report that was bound, and it showed me, my percentages like this. And that was an idea I stole from those advisors because it kind of forces you to diversify. And diversification is your friend in all markets, up, down, or sideways. Um, what I thought I would, end this little brief video with is just a quick view of, what asset classes are tracked by the experts out there. And this periodic table is from a website called The Measure of a Plan. I'll include the link in the description. But this is a really interesting way, and perhaps serves as an explanation of why my portfolio is divided the way it is. So what you see here is a bunch of segments, way more segments than I track. So you have U.S. large cap, so large companies, and U.S. small cap. You have emerging markets. You have REITs, so that's real estate investment trusts, which were a very hot thing among many people, including in Canada. For me, all the REITs today are embedded within the equity class, so you don't see it broken out by me. But the interesting thing here is what they're doing is ranking each of these asset categories by performance every year. So you hover over U.S. large cap, which is the S&P 500, and on average, over the last 25 years, it's actually more than that. It's 15 plus 24, so that's 39 years. The S&P 500 has, on average, returned 8.6% every year. And that varies a lot, right? Like down in 2018, it was in the doghouse, right? 6.2% down. But almost everything was down except for international bonds that year. But this kind of indicates that different segments perform differently in different years, and the way to make sure that you're covered and that you never have too horrible a year is to have investments throughout all of them. Canadian stocks are a decent bet, but they're certainly not the top performing bet in this table over the last 39 years. Only on this screen, there's only been 1 year where they've been the number one performing segment, right? 19.3% return in 2016. A number of percentage points ahead of U.S. small cap. I guess my point is you can never predict which segment is going to be the top performing segment in a given year, so you might as well own them all. And that's been my approach, from the start of my investment, strategy. And the other important thing, I guess, to mention is that it's not enough to just track these percentages. You need to try to establish targets and maintain the targets, so that if you have a blowout year, the S&P, I'm looking at you, right? S&P last 2 years over 20% return. If I did nothing, my U.S. equity percentage would have grown to 40% if I had done nothing. But I don't do nothing. I try to keep these percentages pretty much fixed. When they start to drift, I take action. I sell the ones that have been outperforming and buy the ones that have been underperforming. And that if that sounds a lot like buy low, sell high, you're right. That's exactly what this strategy forces you to do. And it's done without emotion. The spreadsheet is simply a calculation, and once the percentages drift off of the targets that I've set, then it's time to take action and do a sale and a corresponding buy. Anyway, that's a quick overview. The next video will talk about the specific ETFs I hold that make up these pie pieces, and hope you watch. Thanks for listening. See you later.